Welcome to the From the 108 podcast, starring the drunk uncles of White Sox Twitter. He's a Twitter-like whore, an Instagram thirst trap, and your grandma's guilty pleasure, Beef Loaf. A West Coast attitude in a decidedly Midwest body, My Sock Summer. And your host, he's sharing obscure music thoughts to give you time to hit the bathroom, Chorizy-E.
Thank you, Chorizy. Welcome to the From the 108 podcast. Get ready for some baseball, booze, and bullshit. And remember the drinking rules. If My Sock Summer or Beef Loaf show up in the comments, you drink. And if I swear or say, here's the thing, you drink. And of course, you can make me drink with a tip of $1.08 or more. But speaking of drinking, what am I drinking? All right. So tonight, I got myself the old bottle of mystery whiskey out. I've got the Star Wars Stormtrooper, you know. I just did the Star Wars show a little while ago, so I felt like it just made sense. But yeah, so I can't drink too much because I've got this one-man show going here for the next little bit. We'll see how long I can actually go here. And the whiskey will dictate that a little bit on its own. I did want to just talk a little bit right out of the gates about the Netflix Christmas games. I actually quite enjoyed the Netflix Christmas games, even though they were terrible games. I don't watch the NBA really anymore, so there's really no sports on Christmas, on a usual Christmas, and so it was good to watch the games. Netflix held up. I mean, I think we were watching it. It buffered like once. I was pretty excited about that, but I did notice that there's nothing else on Netflix that I really want to watch. They use this as a platform to really kind of advertise a lot of their other shows. And like, I think it was like I forget which game it was. It was either the first or the second around halftime. And they're like, just wait for the big drop from the blimp. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. What could this possibly be? Are we going to have like $1 million drop out of the blimp and people are going to, scratch each other's eyes out for it on the field? Like, I was hoping for something like that, or like Santa Claus or something, like something that would interest me. And it was like the star of a show that I'd never heard of skydiving out of the blimp. And I was like, who cares? Who cares about this? And I don't even think Netflix cared, because it was the guy's second season and they're not going to renew anything past the second season. So they were probably like, well, if he dies, who cares? We already recorded the second season. That's all we're giving him. So I was a little disappointed in just the fact that I'm still paying for Netflix and then watching this and going like, I don't really use this for anything. So otherwise the games were boring, but I'll enjoy watching a football game. I'm sure some of you right now are enjoying watching the Bears play a very boring ass game against the Seattle Seahawks. So yeah, it's football. It's good. I enjoy it. So I'm just gonna watch it. And like I said, I'm not really gonna check out the NBA on Christmas. And so it all worked out. I liked it. I'd love to know what you guys think in the comments. But in the meantime, I've got to pay some bills for my man, My Sock Summer.
Each year, Lawrence's Fish and Shrimp and Chicken, a beloved restaurant, hosted a Christmas feast for those who were hungry. But disaster struck when their delivery truck got stuck, leaving the kitchen without ingredients. Chef Mike looked around disheartened. Without our famous shrimp and crunchy cod, we can't serve the families tonight. Determined to turn things around, Larry leapt out of the deep fryer and declared, "I'll save Christmas." While the wing-zings laughed, Larry was serious. He rallied his side friends, fries, coleslaw, and corn fritters, and hatched a plan. Let's reach out to the other Lawrence's locations, Larry suggested. With help from Beef Loaf, they posted a heartfelt message on the 108 Twitter. Please bring all your lightly breaded shrimp and ocean perch to the canal location so we can feed the families of Chicago. Soon, Chicagoans arrived at the restaurant with shocking shrimp and fresh frog legs, filling Lawrence's Fish and Shrimp and Chicken with goodwill just as the snow fell outside. Larry took charge in the kitchen, and the aroma of wing-zings, onion rings, and chicken tenders filled the air. That night, Larry the Big Chicken Wing didn't just save Christmas, he united the community. In Chicago, the holiday was celebrated like never before, thanks to a big-hearted chicken wing who believed in the power of love and the true spirit of the season. Merry Christmas from Lawrence's. Stop by one of Lawrence's 4 locations today. Check them out at chicagoshrimp.com and place an order if you are on the go. Lawrence's Fisheries, serving the seafood you crave since 1950.
I so love that My Sock Summer recorded that previously and left a big fuck up right in the middle where he just stops. He just stops in his tracks. I love that about him. I did see Beef Loaf is in the comments, so we all drink. Cheers, everyone. And now we're gonna do a little White Sox talk. Now, there's been some White Sox happenings in the past couple weeks, and I haven't been able to really talk about it. We had the Festivus show, so we don't really get into baseball, or at least our baseball thoughts on that show. And then I've been writing blogs for the 108 Miss stuff, so it's been like a lot of Christmas blogs. If you want to read about how there was a Grinch genocide, I've got a blog for that. Go check out the 108 Miss blogs. But in that time, the Sox did sign a starting pitcher, and that's one Bryce Wilson. And one thing I feel like nobody's talking about is my man is thick. He is 108 thick. This guy is 6'2", 272. That's what they list him at. And as a bigger fella, like a little got a little weight to me. They don't ever list you higher than what you are when you're a heavy set dude. So like, I'm guessing my man's pushing 3 bills at 6'2". I kind of love it. I kind of love that he's a big beefy dude. I was, if you watched all of our trade blogs and our videos on that, I was always trading for the beefiest dudes. I think they're underrated in baseball. So I like that. And then, I'm just like looking around, what this guy looks like, what they can use him as. And I know $1 million is not a starter's contract, but for the Sox, it kind of is. And I think as much as he does pitch better as a reliever, I think the Sox are going to try and figure it out as a starter. And I think that's interesting because starting pitching is just changed over the years. It's no longer, a guy that goes 7-8 innings into a game. It's a lot of guys that go 4-5 innings a lot of the times, especially the back of the rotation guys. And if you look at his splits, he's got a weird split where he's like, he's better the second time through the order than the first. But at the end of the day, the third time through the order is bad. It's not good for him. And I just think that they'll probably try and figure out, can we use this guy to be a, 4 to 5 innings a game, get like 120 innings out of a guy who we're paying $1 million to. And if it looks good, looks good enough, then you really take that as a win. I don't think that this is a big upside play. I think that the upside play of this is, can this guy start? And he hasn't been able to in the past. He's worked much better as a reliever. When he can rely heavily on his cutter and his sinker, he's good. The thing that worries me, especially, it just kind of looks like him. Yeah, the 4-seamer is not his best pitch. We'll see how he can handle that being like the third pitch. He has 4 or 5 pitches that he can throw in his arsenal. The thing I really like, though, about him is that he throws a lot of strikes. This is not a guy that's going to walk a bunch of people. I think we watch a lot of bad baseball, and I think the only thing that makes that worse is when we have to go to the park and watch a guy who's just walking the bases loaded, who just can't find the strike zone. That at least is not him. So, sometimes he's going to get banged up a little bit. You got to worry about, can he strike out enough people to make it worthwhile to give up the amount of contact that he's going to give up. That's the question with him. The other questions are, how long into a game can he go? Those types of things. So I think the downside of this, though, is low. Like, this guy will be a good bullpen arm if he doesn't work out as a starter. So it's a minimal risk for a decent reward if you can make him into a starter. And, just another fat guy on the team, man. We need that. We need a little bit of beef. Got a drink here from my guy, Aloha Mr. Handy says, I'll give my guy a chat for actually working today. Yeah, I worked my regular job today, and then I did the Star Wars podcast, and now I'm here with you guys. I just, this is relaxing to me. I'm gonna have a nice cocktail here. Gonna talk a little bit baseball with you guys. I hope everybody just enjoys it. And cheers to all you. My guy Alex Rude says the 108 pod is better than usual this week. I don't know why. I don't either. And Taco Gladiator said this guy is gonna be eating in the bullpen. I hope so. I'm totally fine with this guy being a guy who doesn't end up being a starter. He ends up being in the bullpen. He's a 6th, 7th inning guy that you could really rely on. And in the 5th inning, we could look down and maybe he's having a cheeseburger. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Maybe a nice IPA to go with it. We'll send it down. All right, we got Mike Prazzi says, when does Stone tell him to eat a salad on 670? Cheers, Mike. Praz, there's actually a couple pictures of him that look a little bit like you. I made sure to not choose one for this. I didn't want people to be confused. But I do think that Stoney will go after the weight if the pitching is not there. But if he's looking good, I mean, Stoney's going to be all in it. Stoney's going to be sending him pies down in the dugout. He's going to be all over it. So I'm not really too worried about that. What I will say is that with this signing, this does not preclude you from signing more starting pitchers. So, like, you look at the starting rotation right now as they have it on Fangraphs. It's Cannon, Martin, Burke, Wilson, and Thorpe. Now, if you are listening to this on the podcast, you probably don't even know all the first names of the people I just listed off. But that said, these guys all have options with the exception of Wilson. Wilson could definitely move into the bullpen. There's a lot of optionality you have when you have a team this bad and a rotation like this, where I think there's some guys that have promise in this rotation. I like Drew Thorpe. I like what I saw out of Sean Burke last year. I like the dart. I like Davis Martin. Jonathan Cannon, I don't know. I definitely wouldn't put him as SP1, but he's fine. Like I think there's some guys here, and there's nothing that I dislike. But there's plenty of room to just add another starter. And if someone's got to move out of the rotation, that's fine. And I think that leads, to the next point I wanted to get into. And it's a little bit along the lines of the blog that Beef wrote today, which was the 40 Degree Day blog, which I don't know if you're not familiar with The Wire. 40 Degree Day is just very forgettable. It's no one thinks about it. It's something that you don't really care about. And he compared that to the future value of 40 for a lot of prospects. The future value 40 guys, they're not exciting prospects, right? But you need them, and you need some of them to pop. And I think the problem with the Sox, and I think there's a problem with some of us fans too, is that we look at positions as filled already that are not. They're not filled. So like when I see stuff like, oh, they signed another catcher, they just signed Matt Thaiss. They signed another catcher. Oh, wait, I bet now if they trade Luis Robert, they're probably just going to get another catcher. Good. I have no idea if Edgar Carroll's going to be great. I have no idea if Kyle Teal's going to be great. In fact, the probability of either one of them, just one, being great is low, right? Like, so you should be stacking people up. I think we should have learned this in the last rebuild. Last rebuild, we drafted Jake Berger, and everyone's like, oh, where's he going to play? He plays third base and first base. Those are locked in. What are we going to do with this guy? And, obviously, we found a lot of ways to use Jake Berger. He was probably one of the better players, one of the better stories of that rebuild. And so it's wild to me to see stuff like worrying about the fact that, Brian Ramos and Miguel Vargas are third basemen. Who knows if either one of them are going to hit? Kyle Teal, Edgar Carroll, the same. There's a lot of positions on the field, and you should just be log jamming all of them. At the end of the day, having multiple guys, having guys that are blocked is a good thing. You could always trade those guys. But when you have guys that are going out there and you're just like, well, I just don't have anything better to put out there, that's the problem. That's the huge problem. So like, rack up as many of these 40 FV guys you can, because the Sox minor leagues are rife with tons of guys that are like 30 to 35 guys, right? Like, so get as many of those mid-range players as you can. Some of them are going to pop, some of them are not. Some of them we'll never see. Some of them will be names that you will just be trivia to you if they ever played a game in the major leagues. So like I don't see a problem with backing up your backups. I look at the catcher position, and that's just to me the most volatile. It's you got guys that are putting the most beating on themselves. They have to catch, at least a few times a week in a really tough position. There's plenty of room for 2 guys on the roster, if not 3, if one of them can really hit. So like I have no problem loading up on that position. I also don't have any problem loading up on starting pitching. Like you think about how many starting pitchers that a team goes through in a year. I mean, that was one of the things a few years back when the Sox were really good that we commented on at the end of that season was like the luck they had where they had like 6 guys pitch a majority of their games. I think 5 guys pitched like almost 900 innings or something. It was something insane, the amount of innings that they got out of just their starters and then like one other guy. That's not what you usually get. So you got to load up on all these places. We got a drink from Jerry here. He says, I was going to buy an MSS rant, but 5 minutes Chorizy dead air just seemed wrong. Cheers, Chorizy. Thank you, Jerry. I appreciate the drink though, to give me a little break, a little sustenance between this. But I think the what I'm trying to get at is that the Bryce Wilson signing, I think, is fine. The Matt Thaiss signing is fine. These are guys that you're going to use in the meantime, right? While you're trying to develop a lot of other players, but you have a lot of options with those guys. You can, Thaiss could be out there. You could throw him in the outfield if you need it. I wouldn't recommend it, but it's an option. And so like there's a lot of things that these players can do for you when you have a really bad team. When you have prospects that you're not sure if are going to pop. A guy like Edgar Caro was hurt at the end of last year, right? Like how's he doing? How's the bat looking? Like he's a bat first guy. Is it looking good? Is he going to strike out a ton? Those are things we should all be worried about when you're looking at these guys, and having a backup plan for any of that is tremendous. It's a way better than they usually do. I got another drink here from our guy Senior Sox. He goes, put this towards stopping the 108 downfall. Cheers, Senior Sox. I hope you got that. I hope you got that package you were waiting for. I know we both had them in transit, but I hope you tracked yours down and that you destroyed it once again. So cheers. But yeah, so the moral of the story is have as many players that are good as possible. Have backups for your backups, because me and Beef are hanging out there with a lot of money on over 49.5 wins. We need to get there. We need you guys to put it together. We need the Sox to put it together and actually do something to get to those 50 or so wins that we so sorely need. And I'm just thinking about that. We just saw that the 49.5 wins, just a terrible number. I mean, like that's one of the worst numbers I've seen. I remember, I think it was last year, the Oakland A's at the time in Oakland, I think they opened at like 53 or something. And I had a lot of people that I listened to on sports gambling going, you got to bet the over on this. It's so impossible to only win 53 games. The Sox showed them that it's very possible to win less than that. But at the same time, the Sox have been very unlucky last year. They were terrible. Don't get me wrong. They were terrible. But like they had a lot of unlucky turns. And I just, it's hard to repeat that. Just like it's hard to repeat being the best team in the league, it's hard to repeat being so incredibly bad. So I'm pretty confident in the 50 wins. We'll see how that all goes. I just hope for like having to watch this shit that it goes a lot better than than last year went. And with that, I'm going to pay a couple more bills here.
The tree with lights so grand, tunes of joy from a magical band at Mazda of Orland Park we sing. Merry Christmas, like a bells ring. Merry Christmas, Mazda style. Smiles and laughter all the while. From our hearts to yours today. Merry Christmas, we all say.
wish I could have recorded something different for that. But thank you, My Suck Summer, for having that ready for me to use today. I'm gonna do a little last call here. We don't. It's a little bit just me, so it's not quite as fun. We're not gonna get answers out of the other guys, but I think you commenters might have some thoughts on this because I've seen a lot of stuff on the internet about this recently, and I don't agree with really any of it. So Rob Manfred and I think Jason Stark wrote the article, talked about the golden at bat. The golden at bat. People are like, this is stupid. This is a ridiculous idea. I hate it. That's pretty much the consensus. Even my guy Beefloaf, he goes out and he writes a blog. He's like, hey, instead of this, let's have re-entry like you have in softball. I don't know. I'm a little I'm not agreeing that this is a terrible idea. I think it needs to be thought through a little bit more. I think we need to kind of get into this a little bit. And let me tell you why. Baseball has a very specific problem. While it has a tremendous amount of one-run games. So last year, I think there was almost 700. I think it was 675 games ended in a one-run differential. That's great. That is great for a sport to have that many close games. That's 30% of their games. The problem is, unlike other sports, in other sports, you get to have the ball in the hands of the best player, right? Like if you think about watching football, you're putting the ball in Patrick Mahomes' hands in those last minutes to go down the field and try and score. You're in basketball, you're putting in Steph Curry's hands to shoot that three. You can do those types of things in those sports. In baseball, while the defense can do so, the defense can say, hey, look, we're going to put, our best pitcher out there and our best closer and pitch to this guy. That's not something the hitter can do. You're left to whoever it is. And a lot of rosters are constructed in a way to have some semblance of defense that there's guys at the bottom of the order that just can't hit. And so I like the idea of the golden at bat to be able to say, let's swap this right now and we'll put the better hitter in place. Now, I do think that we have to put some more rules around this though. And Beefloaf asks, am I fired from the podcast for having SDJ 5K on Festivus? No, you're just suspended for a week. Stay down in Texas for a little bit. We'll get back to you in a bit. Cheers, Beef. But the idea here to me makes sense. It does sound weird at first, and I get why people would react negatively to it right out of the gates. Like, hey, that doesn't sound like anything I've ever heard of. It sounds like some little league shit. It sounds like what they do in spring training to get people more at bats. But when you think about it in the sense of, hey, we can have a situation where in almost every night, look at those numbers, right? Like if you're 30% of your games are one-run games, every night we could have a great hitter up against another team's closer. And that's where I think that the rules need to be tweaked a little bit to handle this. One, I think if you do this, it needs to invalidate the 3-hitter rule, right? Like if you're going to have someone that's going to come in and take an at bat, as the opposing team, you should be able to say, okay, well, I'm going to change my pitcher now, regardless of how many batters he's faced, right? This just lends to that idea of having the 2 best players possible facing off. So I think that needs to be a thing. I also think it needs to hurt a little bit, right? You can only use this once a game. And then after that half inning, one of the players that was swapped has to leave the game. So that you can't just keep doing this, right? Like having this, it really takes away from it if it's every inning I'm just moving my my power hitting first baseman to bat for my shortstop, right? So I think that's one thing, and I think that's an obvious thing. I know they've talked about what inning could it be in? I think it should be in any inning, whenever you want to use it. But you only get it once a game, and like I said, it invalidates the the 3 batter rule. I think that would be, like a must-have, because the idea behind this is not so much just getting that guy at a bat, it is having this incredible matchup. When you think about the way that people watch games now, it's very different than it was 20 years ago. Think about any sport, right? I mean, like, this is one of the problems the NBA is having, is that like people just watch highlights, or people are only interested in the fourth quarter. Well, in baseball, I mean, people aren't like, kids aren't sitting down and watching game the way that we watched it in for me, the 80s and 90s, and for a lot of you, or before that or after that. Nowadays, it's everything is fast paced. Everything is quick moments of games. You want a sport where you have a ton of important matchups every night that you can treat like an NFL red zone, which is very successful. People love red zone. I love red zone. I like, as soon as the Bears suck, that's what I'm watching, is red zone every Sunday, right? Like, so I like that idea. And I think that if you had that, this is the type of thing that on a nightly basis, you're cutting away from, right? Like, you're cutting from the studio audience to see who's pitching against who, right? And like, in a situation like this, where you're saying, hey, this pitcher only has to come in to face this one batter. I mean, you could bring in starting pitchers to do that, right? Like, if it's someone's throw day, you can have some really great matchups in late inning games with some of your top players. And I think that's where, to me, it makes sense. Of course, there's downsides. Of course, there's downsides to it. But I think some of the downsides that I've seen, I don't really agree with. Like, it's like, oh, this takes away the, kind of like the random guy that gets that opportunity and he gets the big hit. It's like, not really. You'd still have plenty of opportunities in a game, a close game, for these other guys to have those at bats. You only use this once. Like, I don't see that you'd really lose that much. What you'd probably lose is like a guy getting intentionally walked because first base is open, and then like your worst hitter on the team getting struck out. Like, that's what you'd lose, right? And so, like, yeah, Prez puts, go fuck yourself, David Freese. That probably still happens. Like, those types of things still happen. Like, think about, the Jeff Blum hit in the extra innings. They would have burned that golden at bat already. Like, that wouldn't even have been a thing. So I think, like, to think that would just go away is short-sighted, right? And I think we've been short-sighted on a lot of these rules. Now, the Ghost Runner sucks, right? But like, a lot of these other things, we've looked at and been like, well, why are we doing that? Why are we doing the pitch clock? I think the pitch clock has ended up being pretty good. I was just talking about the 3-hitter rule. Like, I thought that was going to stink, but it actually moves the game along, and it adds a little strategy to it. Makes you think about who's going to be up in this inning, who's going to pinch hit. Like, I like a lot of the changes that they've made, and I didn't think they were going to be good. I'm probably on the wrong side of this one again, but I don't care. This to me just makes a lot more sense. It seems like something that would make games really exciting. And like, in case you haven't noticed, like, that's a problem for the MLB. They need these games to be more exciting. So I'm not. I know a lot of people don't love it, but it may never see the light of day. But I'd like to see how this rolls out in like the minor leagues. I'd like to see a little bit of this and see, does this work? Is it interesting? Especially in the minors. Because you think about the variance between the players and the minors. Like, you got guys there that are like destined for the majors, and then you've got guys there that are, just the roster filler, right? Like, so it could be really interesting. I'd like to see how that goes. So, as I mentioned, I can't talk nonstop for a really long time, so I'm going to get out of here in just a minute. But I did want to get into the thank yous and GFYs. I don't have any GFYs this week. I did want to thank everybody who watched Festivus, everybody who participated in Festivus. I thought it was a lot of fun. Thank you to John Schriffen for showing up. But I also want to thank, unfortunately, someone who passed away, and that's Ricky Henderson. Ricky Henderson, it was as a child watching Ricky Henderson, I was enamored, man. I mean, like, the stolen base is still one of the most exciting plays in baseball. And not to limit Ricky to just being a stolen base guy, he was, as five-tool of a player as there is. I loved watching him play, though. It was just so exciting. But when it comes to stolen bases, it's just he's so far out in front of kind of everybody else when you start to think about these things. And like, I remember, being a kid in the 90s and, me and Beef collecting baseball cards. I was always looking for that guy who was gonna break the stolen base record, and you had all these guys. It was still a fairly speedy game, so you get these guys like Marquise Grissom, and I had like a ton of Marquise Grissom rookie cards, like, oh man, this guy's going to break the record. And then that helped me to realize just how far everybody else was from this. And to give you some perspective on that, when in 91, when he broke the record, his record was 939 stolen bases. He ended his career with over 1,400. So like, after he breaks the record, he steals another 467 bases. And to put that into perspective for you, right now, the active leader in stolen bases is Starling Marte with 452 stolen bases. That's not even as many as Ricky stole after Ricky broke the record. So like, that's just how dominant of a player he was. I remember watching an interview. He was Harold Reynolds. They were on that little baseball field in the MLB studio, and Harold's asking Ricky about, like, what do you do when you're at first base to get a jump on the pitcher? And he's telling Harold Reynolds, who was a good base stealer himself. Like, Harold Reynolds was no slouch when it came to stealing bases, and he was talking about watching the guy's elbows and like how they turn with the elbows to see if the guy was going to come towards him or if he was going to go to the plate. And Harold Reynolds looked at him and said, I've never heard of that. And it was just like, and this is just something that was inherently obvious to Ricky Henderson. And I think in any facet of life, when you meet those types of people, it's just incredible to listen to them talk about whatever they're talking about, because when they see things in a different light than anybody really does, and just understand things in a different way than you could possibly grasp, it's really exciting. And it's really sad that we lost Ricky at such a young age, but I just felt like I just had to talk about him a little bit because we haven't had the chance to do it, and just loved him as a player. So good night, everybody. We will talk to you soon, and until then, just keep hitting the blogs. We're gonna keep cranking them out. Thanks, everyone.
In the city of Chicago, back in the day, there was a ball player. They called him Jizz. They said playing for the White Sox, he had a certain flair. He hit 69 home runs, man, that ain't fair. He swung that bat like a wild tornado storm. Every time he stepped up, he smashed it. It was the norm. The ladies in the stands, they couldn't help but stare. The legend of Alejandro Jizz spreading everywhere. Ooh, Alejandro Jizz got the magic touch. On the field, he was a kid.